Hello, Mindsetters, and now it's time for grade 12s. Hope you're up and ready, and you're so revitalized. I saw on the page that everybody has been looking forward for this great session. And today, we're talking about evolution with Aslam. Aslam, how are you doing?
Good, Abram. How are you doing?
You can tell, I'm so super recharged.
You looked recharged.
Thank you very much. Well, Mindsetters, this is another show that is brought to you by Macmillan. And you know what? We've got notes for you to download for free on our website, which is learnextra.co.za/live. They're for free. And also, you can chat to me and ask some questions, post your comments also on the page, and we'll help you through. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/learnextra. I'm looking forward for this great lesson, and Aslam is up and ready. Take it away.
Thanks, Abram. Welcome back, Mindsetters. We dealt with genetics part 2 last week. Now we move on to the last segment of your paper 1. We are moving quite fast, guys, and we need to keep up with the pace. Good. We are looking at evolution, as Abraham has told you. We'll talk about a little bit more about that. What are we actually looking at in this section? For today, we just want to go back a little bit to your grade 10 and 11 work to discuss the difference between a hypothesis and a theory. We also want to summarize the ideas of evolution by Erasmus Darwin, Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, I love to say that at least once, I won't say it again, Alfred Wallace, and Charles Darwin. Those 4 guys we're going to focus on, and we focus into more detail with the Lamarck and Darwin. We also look at Lamarck's theory in more detail. Like I said, we're focusing on that. And we look at natural selection as an explanation for evolution. So not a lot of content, but we're going to answer some lovely questions to take us through these things as well towards the end of the segment. So keep your concentration there, listen up, guys, and most importantly, as Abraham has told you earlier, post your questions on the Facebook page and your comments.
Oh, yeah.
And also, answer the questions. If you know the answer for a particular question, share your answer with somebody. If it's incorrect, we will pick it up here, and you will pick up as we're going on that way. The very difficult questions you post, we're going to answer them for you as well.
Well said, Aslam. And also, I like the vibe that Mindsetters are also on the page to help one another. So if you know an answer, help someone else who doesn't.
Thanks, Abram. All right, where we go straight into it, a hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? What is it to hypothesize? We are doing it every day. I say to myself, if I leave Azadville at 4:30, I should reach here by 5:30. You notice? If I leave Azadville at this time, I will reach somewhere at a certain time. I did not say, will I reach Randburg at 5:30 if I leave there? That's a question. I didn't say to determine whether I will reach Randburg at 5:30 if I leave Azadville at 4:30. That is an aim. So we say, if I leave, so it's your if-then. So it's your cause and effect, an independent variable and a dependent variable situation. So what is it actually then? It is a prediction. So you're seeing something and you're making a prediction of this phenomena, something, a phenomenon or phenomena, plural, which can be tested by observation or experiment. If I say that if I leave Azadville at 4:30, then I should get to Randburg by 5:30, I can test that. Because then I leave Azadville at 4:30 and I see whether I get here on time. At the end, when I reach here, I can then make a conclusion based on the experiment or the observation, my test. So first I made a prediction, the hypothesis, then I carry out this investigation, experiment, I do the thing, and at the end I can say, yes, my hypothesis was true, and if it was true, we accept the hypothesis. If it was wrong, then we reject the hypothesis and we start again. So it is not yet a fact, it's not even a theory yet, it's merely your gut feeling. But you need to take a stand. You can't sit on a fence You've got to say, this is going to happen or that is going to happen. So that is what a hypothesis is about. Now, after a hypothesis or hypotheses are tested, reviewed by scientists, not only in Johannesburg, not only in Gauteng, not only in South Africa, but globally, then we can then accept this hypothesis, and the hypothesis can be converted into a theory. So what is the theory then? It's an explanation of a group of physical phenomena, some of the things that people or scientists have observed, firmly founded on observation, on what they see, what they hear, what they feel, and experiment, which continues on to be investigated. It will be continuously reviewed by scientists globally. So it's a theory which we make today, Abraham, can be disproved in 10 years' time. Abraham, the scientist, says, no, guys, you said that the earth was round. No. The earth is not round. But for his new theory to be accepted, he needs to give us firm evidence. And this cannot be just accepted by Abraham and his friends, but globally, all the scientists. You get that, Abraham?
I get that.
Good. So that is a theory. Evolution. That's what we're talking about now. And for once, Belinda, I will pick up my cell phone, which is off, I guarantee. I have a phone in my hand. If somebody told me, Abraham, when I was in grade 12, and judging by the color of my hair, that must be a long time ago. If somebody told me that I could carry a telephone this small in my hand, with which I could communicate for free nogal to all people all over the world, I would have told him, you must be smoking something. So what has happened? We had those telephones, and I remember my sister studying in Pakistan, and we had to call her, expensive. And we would then call the exchange. I want a person-to-person call to certain Aisha Gori Khan. So only when she came on, then we would then start, and we start getting billing. And today, with this, it's free. So what has happened? The mode of communication has changed from then to now. What has happened? Our mode of communication has evolved. So to evolve simply means in English to change. And let's see what it says here. Evolve, to unroll, to disclose, to develop, to unravel, to change. This is what the dictionary says. The theory of evolution states that all species of living things that exist today, those things, you and I, the ant, the bug, the spider, the bird, all these organisms and all the species that exist today, and some and many more that are now extinct, they don't live anymore, have evolved from simple life forms which first developed more than 3 billion years ago. This is the basic premise of evolution. And that is, and to put it, this whole thing very simply, we say that this is what the scientists are saying in terms of evolution. All living organisms developed from existing organisms. Or we can say that all organisms living today have a common ancestor. Now this word ancestor, we must look at differently, not the way Abraham and I will look at ancestors like our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers. But what they talk about ancestors, when evolutionists are talking of ancestor, they're talking about that one organism that was the original organism that then developed, or rather was the beginning life form, from which, I can't say that one developed because that would be incorrect, but from which branch and rebranch and rebranch and rebranch to form species that exist today. So this is what evolution tries to explain. Some terminology that we need to learn in this year, the first of which is a gene pool. Now this is not the swimming pool as suggested here in the diagram, but it's simply, remember we did genotype and phenotype, homozygous and heterozygous, all the genes of a particular species within that population is known as the gene pool. That means the genes of all the organisms in a population. Obviously, these organisms must be of the same species in that gene pool there. That brings us to another word, species. What is a species? A species is a group of organisms which share similar characteristics and can interbreed. They can interbreed among themselves, but not just, it doesn't end there. There's a third important component. And what is that component? To produce fertile offspring. So one is that the fact that they can reproduce, right? But when they have offspring, their offspring can also reproduce. That's what fertile means. They're not shooting blanks. They're shooting live ammo. They can have children. Okay? That leads us to another word, and that is the word population. What is a population? A population is a group of organisms of the same species that can interbreed. And if they are the same species, that means they can produce fertile offspring as well, in a specific habitat at a specific time. This is important. We cannot talk of a population of donkeys and zebras. Donkeys are donkeys, that's one species. Zebras are a different species. So when we talk about a population, it must be either of giraffes or donkeys or zebras. At the same time, that's the same species. Next, we cannot talk about the donkeys and zebras, full stop. We must specify the habitat. In Azadville, in Krugersdorp, in Randburg, at a specific time, in July, in August, in September, whichever time. So even in your own garden, you may have a maize plantation in your back of your garden. I'm hoping it's maize and nothing else that you're planting, or radish, or potatoes, or tomatoes. You may have a population this year, this season. Next year, the same type of species will grow there, but this particular crop that grows is not the same population that you had last year. It's a different population. Why? Because time has changed. In your own town, or in my own town, I may be living in one area, and I've got my plantation of mealies in my garden. And down at the school, we have another plantation of mealies. The plantation in my garden is a population on its own, and the one in the school is another. Although they're the same species, although they can interbreed, but they are not at the same place, so they do not form a population. Let's understand that carefully. So people, in this section, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of terminology. You need to get to grips with that terminology. Let's now go into the early theories and the people that we spoke about a little earlier. The first guy that we spoke about was Erasmus Darwin, 1731 to 1802. And don't freak out. You wouldn't have to identify his photo in the exam. You just need to know, what did he say, basically? He proposed his theory in a book called Zoonomia. Zoonomia. That means crazy about animals. And what did he say? All life forms developed from simple forms. There are similarities among various organisms, and this led them to believe that they all related somehow. He said artificial selection and metamorphosis showed how changes may have occurred. He also felt that organisms can change in their lifetime. And this we'll talk about later. He felt that an organism in its own lifetime can change. And it can pass these changes to the next generation. The next guy was our friend, and I told you I'm only going to say that full name once, Lamarck, 1744 to 1829. He had two ideas. His ideas were the law of use and disuse, and the law of inheritance of acquired or modified characteristics. We're going to look at him in detail, so we'll come back to that. I'm not going to go into detail there now. Next guy was Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882. He's described evolution by a theory known as natural selection. And in the same time with Darwin was this guy called Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823 to 1913. He also used natural selection as an explanation. Interestingly, Darwin went on his voyage and he picked all these ideas up and he made his theory. He didn't publish it, he was too scared. In the same time, this guy Wallace sends his publication, his writing, his paper on natural selection to Darwin. Now Darwin sits with this problem, he's reading something and whatever Wallace is saying is what he is saying. With that interesting thought, this dilemma that's going on, I keep you with the suspense and we go for a break.
I really can't wait to hear more on that. And also, I like what the mindsetters are doing on the page. They're debating about this topic. Some say, you know what, evolution is just too drastic for me. But anyway, keep those comments coming over Facebook. We are on facebook.com/Learn Extra. See you right after this. Welcome back, Mindsetters. Grade 12. I know you're enjoying this session as much as much as I do. I love what Kulube just said on the page, saying that we're so faithful to have you, Abraham, as our helper. You know what, guys? Keep those comments coming because we're here to help you. Talking about helping people, there's a question for you, Mr. Aslam.
Yes.
And it is from Ledrada saying, where is the gene pool and what is it?
Okay, good. What's the name again, sorry?
It is Ledrada.
Ledrada, good. We discussed it and I just want to explain it a little further so you may understand it a little better. If you look at in this particular room right now, not very ideal conditions for interbreeding to take place between Abraham and I, we wouldn't be able to produce offspring. But let's say we had a little village here in this studio, and Abraham, you have what color eyes? Brown eyes.
Brown, very brown.
Eyes. So Abraham has very brown eyes, right? Okay, it's a new color, very brown, right? Okay, and I have brown eyes as well. Okay, all right. And my nose is quite big. My ears are big as well. Okay, I have fairly straight hair. Abraham has curly hair. Okay. Now, in this particular environment, then the idea is that in this environment, the genes that are available for eye color is generally brown. But if you go back to genetics, because brown is dominant, Abraham and I could be heterozygous for brown or homozygous for brown. But those are the variety that we are offering. Large ears, small ears, straight hair, curly hair. That means the genes that code for these is existent in this environment. So in a population now we go further, in a population, the genes that are available for the variety of characteristics, Abraham, is known as the gene pool.
I'm loving that answer, and you know what, it's just fun learning today because you get to experiment these things and understand them in details because we have these things, but when someone else reads from the textbook, it's hard to understand. But having said that, let's get more on those theories so that we can understand.
Thanks, Abraham. Thank you very much. I also heard Abraham saying before we went to the break that people are debating the story of evolution.
Yes.
And all. Remember, guys, nobody in evolution is telling you to change your belief. Because your religious beliefs will say one, and the scientific theory of evolution says something else. And they may be in conflict with each other. But nobody's asking you to change your belief. What the syllabus is asking you to do is to understand the theory of evolution and explain the theory of evolution as an evolutionist would do. Nobody's saying you have to believe or disbelieve the theory of evolution. They are asking you to understand the theory of evolution. And even if you want to debate the theory of evolution with an evolutionist or a scientist, and if you feel strongly against evolution, you would have to know what the theory of evolution is. Otherwise, you start debating with your heart, and any debate from the heart, you will lose. When you learn about debating, you learn that you have to debate with fact. You cannot debate with emotion because you will lose the debate. So even for that, you have to learn the theory of evolution to be able to debate it. Good. We're moving on, and now we're going into the stories. Remember, we just gave you a brief explanation of all. Now we're going into it. The first one is Lamarck explained. Lamarck, French guy, by the way, and you could have obviously noticed that from his name earlier. He said that species evolve from older species. Charles Darwin said that Alfred Russel Wallace said that, and Erasmus Darwin said the same thing. They all said that species evolved from older species. No problem there. Then we said that he has two principles, the law of use and disuse, and the law of inheritance of modified structures. I'm just going to put the S there, right? Now let's go into that and explain each one. The first law is the law of use and disuse. Now listen to this very carefully, Abraham. Lamarck said that if an organism, and I'm hoping Belinda and the team at the back are also listening very carefully to this. Lamarck said that if an organism can be me and you, Abraham, as well, and Belinda and the other guy, James, and Abraham at the back, and the rest of the team. If an organism uses a structure often, if it uses it more frequently, then it becomes bigger. I can see those mindsetters' minds are racing in terms of what they can use to make what bigger and the rest of it. But we're not going to go there. If they don't, and this is the worst part for you mindsetters, listen, if they do not use it at all, it becomes smaller and may disappear. Intense stuff. So if you use a part of your body more, according to Lamarck's theory, it will become bigger and, he said, it's not written there, but better and more efficient. And if you don't use it often, it will become smaller and eventually it will disappear. Belinda, you're getting that story now, eh? Good. He called this the law of use and disuse. Then he went on to say, this was not all. He says, now this characteristic that this organism made better in its lifetime, it has the ability to pass that characteristic off to the offspring. So now something happened to an organism in its lifetime that made it better, and it could then pass this on to its offspring. Now, you've been with me from DNA right up to the end of genetics. You're already in your mind, questions must be coming. But if the guy didn't have the gene in the first place, how can this gene go on further? Those are the questions that scientists were asking Lamarck, and we'll carry on with that. What was this? The law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. Now, this word acquired is it's a mouthful, sorry. So instead of using the word acquired, you can use the inheritance of modified characteristics. What does this mean? That means things that change in a lifetime can be transferred to the offspring. Now let's take a simple scenario. I'm going home from Randburg. I have an accident, God forbid, and I hurt my leg in such a bad way that they have to chop my leg off right here by just above the knee. Does that mean, Abraham, that every time I have a child now, remember this is an acquired characteristic, in my lifetime it happened, does it mean that the children I'm going to bear, well, I won't bear them anyway.
Of course, no.
The children that I will have are going to have one leg?
Of course, no.
Right, so that's something, mindsetters, that you have to keep in your mind. Now let's look at what he's saying. The other thing he said was forces within the organism drive species to evolve up the ladder of progress, to go from simple to complex. That means the organism changes because the organism wants to change. Now let's look at what this guy is saying. And basically this is what Lamarck is saying. Right? Mother is telling father there, stretch. Think about the children. His theory was based on the giraffes. And we're going to go a little bit down in terms of the diagram. There we go, there. Originally, Lamarck says that all giraffes were short. Lamarck said that all giraffes were short. They then got into competition with bucks. They were feeding in the same area. So there was some competition among them. In order for the giraffes to survive, they needed to feed higher. So what did they say? Well, they didn't say it anyway. Giraffes don't talk, remember that. But what did they need to do? They needed to reach up to the top. And to reach up to the top, they stretched. And when they stretched, their necks and legs got longer. Original short neck ancestor. Keep stretching the neck to reach higher, and continuous stretching until necks becomes progressively longer. So what is this law talking about in terms of what Lamarck said? The law of, you got it right, the law of use. If the organism is using the neck, it's stretching the neck all the time, the neck gets bigger, gets longer. And then he says that the long neck descended after many generations. That means this long neck characteristic was passed on to the offspring. What law is that? The law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. So in other words, if I decide to braid my hair today, and I can then pass this characteristics to my children later. This is what Lamarck's theory in essence is saying. We move on with Lamarck's theory. We'll come back to that one just now. Why was his theory rejected? I've already alluded to some of that, and Abraham has answered some of that question already. First of all, we'll go to the other reason first. Organisms cannot change or adapt because they want to. The environment determines the change. The environment in which the organism is living will determine which organism is better suited and which is not better suited. The one that is better suited in that environment will survive. The one that is not suited will die. And if it survives, the one that is better suited, it will reproduce. And when it reproduces, it can then pass on the favorable genes, not the characteristic, the gene, genotype, to the offspring. And that genotype will then show up in the phenotype, in the characteristic as the organism develops. So that's the first one. The second one says there is not sufficient evidence to prove that changes or modifications occurring in an organism's lifetime can be passed on to further generations. So these are the two criticisms that led to the rejection of Lamarck's theory. One, an organism cannot change because it wants to. Lamarck's theory is deterministic. Deterministic, big word. What does it mean? It means an organism wants to change, therefore it will change. I want to be better, I will. Now guys, please don't take this the wrong way, because now you can go back and tell your parents, you know what, no matter what happens, if I want to do better in school, I can't, because genetically I can't do better. That's nonsense. You can work to get better marks. Your body phenotype will not change. Your results will change. That's a different thing. Your body will not change because you want your body to change. Yes, you can become a little bit more muscular, etc., with gymming and so on. But there's no theory that shows that an organism can become taller. How I would have loved to be a few centimeters taller. I could reach to the top of the board in my classroom. I can't. I've got to really stretch, and it doesn't work for me. So that's the one. And the second one is there's not enough evidence to prove that the modification that took place in an organism can be transferred to the offspring in the next generation. And we showed you some of the pictures there to discuss that. That then takes us to the theory of Charles Darwin, and Charles Darwin puts his theory in the theory of natural selection, which he wrote in his book on the origin of species. The main components of natural selection are the following. First of all, in any population, there are more offspring produced than the environment can support. If every organism, if you look at the probability of every organism reproducing, there would be billions and billions and billions of each species. But this, in nature, this is not the case. So they're saying that there's lots of offspring, but not all survive to adulthood. So there's always a struggle for life, and many organisms die. The organisms, in addition to this, we must also say that there is variation in the species. There's a species, Homo sapiens, Abraham and I. We have differences. I pointed out some of those differences earlier. So among the species, there is variation, differences. And more offspring are produced. The organisms best, and then we can write here, there is competition. So the organisms best suited to the environment survive. And if they survive, they can reproduce and pass on their inherited not adaptations, take that out completely. They're inherited genes to the next generation. In this way, the composition of the population changes. Note, doesn't say the composition of the individual. It says the composition of the population changes. We're going to explain that in a little bit detail just now. Because the best suited individual survive, the population remains suited for its environment. And the key words in that, I'm going to explain an example after the break. The key words, many offspring, variety, competition, survival of the fittest, which we will discuss just now, natural selection, population changes over several generations. If you remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullets, you can answer any natural selection question. I think that earns you another break.
You know what, just before we go to that break, there are 3 things that you're going to answer after the break. One is, why are you killing the students? Because so many comments are like, Aslam is killing us today. You're really, really rocking up the show. And secondly, also, what is the correspondence between these 2 theories, the Lamarck one and the Darwin's one? But we'll get to that. And the third one is just a surprise. Mindset is keep in tune and in touch with us over Facebook. We're here for you. See you right after this. Welcome back, Mindsetters. Having so much fun, and Aslam is on fire today on evolution, and so are you guys, asking him some questions. I said before the break that he has to respond to some of those questions, and on top of those, there are some questions from you, Mindsetters, which you've asked me to ask him, saying, do you, Aslam, believe in evolution? And also, what is your view on Lamarck's law?
Now, you know what's a good answer, Abraham, from a teacher? No comment.
No comment. Playing it safe and tricky. But
besides being safe, you must be able to gauge from what we say which way we are leaning. It shouldn't be so easy for me to say, I'm going that way, or I'm going that way.
Very smart and clever from a teacher. You know what, Mindsetters, if you haven't downloaded your notes, you can just go over our website. It is learnextra.co.za/live. Download them. They are proudly sponsored by Macmillan. So thank you very much, and big ups to Macmillan. Guys, I'm over the page chatting to you, and so is Aslam, ready to give us more. Take it away.
Thanks, Abraham. I'm enjoying the energy that Abraham is transferring to me. He's got so much of energy. He's transferring all that energy to my gray beard, and I'm getting revitalized. Guys, this is the best part of the show today. We're moving towards, first of all, rounding up the theories that we have learned, but more importantly, we want to see whether we can apply what we have learned by answering questions, and that is going to form the best part of today. Many of your questions I've gone through with Abraham during the break. Many of your questions are questions indeed that we are going to be answering when we look at the questions from past papers. So just hang in there. Somebody said that you're writing on Friday and Monday, the supplementary. Guys, remember, start by going over your 2012 paper first. Look at the 2012 paper, look at it again, look at it again, and look at it again. And thereafter, you can look at your trial papers and the 2011 paper, etc. But look at the 2012 paper, go through it properly so you know where you went wrong. Now, let's come back to Darwin and the natural selection theory. Now, remember earlier we spoke about Lamarck and the giraffes. Well, the giraffes are back. What a beautiful situation here. We can use one example of the giraffe's long neck, and we can explain it in the viewpoint of 2 different. Look at the first guy said that they were all short. Darwin said there was variation among them. So let's see what it means. Now remember those words I said, and I'm going to write some of them here. Many offspring, variety, competition, survival of the fittest, natural selection. What is important, Mindsetters, is to take these principles. I told you those are the keywords. But it's no sense just learning them. What is natural selection? Right, it's many offspring, a variety, competition. The best one will survive, and the one that is not so suited will die, and so on and so on. And remember it, but you cannot apply it. The important thing is, can you use these words in this example? Let's look at it. Let's see if it fits in. So the first one says Darwin and Wallace theory, saying that original group had variation. There were some that were short neck and some that had longer necks. So there you go. First of all, there were many, and secondly, there's variety. The favorite, then obviously, the food is at a particular length, and they will compete among themselves. So listen to what Lamarck said, always short. Darwin is saying, no. There were some tall giraffes and some short ones. Okay? The short ones were out-competed. So there's the word competition coming in. The short ones were out-competed, and therefore they died. They couldn't get to the food. The taller ones were getting the food. And because the taller ones had this tall gene within their bodies, they did not acquire it. They had the gene for tallness. They then, when they interbred, transferred this tall gene to their offspring. Therefore, today we are seeing more, well, we're seeing all giraffes that are tall. That means the frequency of tallness among the giraffes has increased. Notice, the organism has not changed. The frequency of the gene that causes tallness has increased. The frequency has increased. So therefore, there are tall giraffes and not short ones. And the frequency, and this doesn't happen today and tomorrow. It happens over several generations, Now, what we see is only the tall variety. And when we see the tall variety, that means it outcompeted the shorter variety. So after many generations, you're getting the situation that is formed there. So that is how you can apply Darwin's theory. And listen, this is a giraffe story. It could be any other characteristic that we can look at. So I'm hoping, mindsetters, you with me on this, and let's move on. I have to go down again and again. All right. To sum it up, this is what natural selection is all about. Here's your birds there, and you notice that each one has in his mouth a green beetle. So in this particular environment then, eventually what's going to happen? The green beetle population will decrease because the bird likes the green one. And the frequency of green beetles will decrease and decrease and decrease. And because the bird doesn't like these guys, whatever color that is, that's somewhere in between pink and something else. All right? Whatever color that is, their frequency will increase. So over time, over several generations, there will be more of these guys in circles and less of these guys with crosses because they're going to be eaten up. So it doesn't mean that if you have a good character, in this case, for these birds, those green ones are tasty. Tasty is a nice thing, but not if tasty is nice for the bird that's eating you. So if you're tasty and you're going to be eaten up, that's not a good thing. You'd rather be tasting awful so that the bird doesn't eat you. That gives you a greater chance of survival. And remember, natural selection doesn't talk of the best forever. It talks about, in a particular space, which one is better suited. To give you an example at grade 12 level, you are now in grade 12 in 2013. You need to be better than your peers in 2012. You are not being pitted against the ones that wrote in 2012, nor are you pitted against those that are going to write in 2014. When you need to get to varsity, you need to be better than the guys that you're writing with this year. So you will be selected by the varsity. There we go to the favorite part, the questions. Tens of thousands of years ago, the animals that evolved into giraffes were not as tall as modern giraffes. Over a long period of time, the necks of giraffes became longer. They could reach the leaves in the high trees and reach down for water. And they're giving you the picture there. Describe how the long necks of modern giraffes would have been explained by the following. Darwin. We just went through that now. What did he say? Many offspring. There was variety. You must explain the variety. Don't just write variety. Some had short and some were tall or long. You can talk about the long necks and the legs. There was competition for food. The taller ones were better suited. Okay, suited. And therefore they survived. And over several generations, natural selection took place, and therefore now the giraffes are all tall. Can you see the logical sequence in which we explain that? And Lamarck, we said that all giraffes were short. And they needed to reach higher, so they stretched. And what law was this? The law of use. And because of that, what happened? They became tall. And then what did they do? They passed on this characteristic to the offspring. Okay? Are we there? So this is the inheritance of acquired characteristics. We explain why Lamarck's theory is not accepted. We just did that 5 minutes ago. Now it's easy because we just did it now. But remember, in exams, it's a long time away. You need to revise these things. One is, organisms do not change because they want to. Environment determines that. That's the first one. The second one is that no evidence, or not sufficient evidence anyway, that modified characteristics are passed on to offspring. There's not enough evidence to prove that this happens, that something that happens in a lifetime of an organism can be transferred. Can you see how now we've learned something? The end product is, how do we answer this? So how do you apply what you have learned? It's no sense learning all parts of the bicycle and then I tell you go out and ride. It's not going to help. The most important thing, guys, is when you're learning, even while you're watching here, there's certain times when we don't get there because time is short to the questions. The questions are in the notes. You need to answer those questions. And that will tell you whether the lesson was successful for you. Can I answer this question? That's the question you need to ask yourself. Okay. Both Darwin and Lamarck proposed theories to explain the origin of new species. State 4 observations upon which Darwin based his theory. Okay? And they are, do you remember? There were many offspring. Secondly, there is variety. In his travels, he saw there was lots of variety. Thirdly, he also spoke about artificial selection. Now, what does this mean? We discussed this under genetics recently. Artificial selection is where we humans select the best organisms to breed among themselves to highlight a particular characteristic. For example, in England in that time, they used to do a lot of dog races. So the greyhound developed from dogs. They developed the greyhound, and from there they decided that these dogs were the best, so they bred those, and that's how it continued. So Darwin saw this happening in his lifetime. So he noticed that. He also, with this variety, he saw on the different voyages the natural selection that took place. He saw these changes, that nature, first his artificial selection took place. He also saw that natural selection took place. We also talk about genetic drift, which is not too involved in your present curriculum, so we don't have to go into the details of that. But that was one of the observations, that there is this shift. Genetic drift simply means there's a change in the frequency of certain alleles in a population over time. We'll talk about that some other time. All right? So that's the first question there. And secondly, tabulate two differences between Darwin's and Lamarck's theory. That question was asked earlier. Now, notice the mark allocation there, 5 marks. And every time I give you a tabulation question, I highlight that there's 5 marks for this question. Why? Because 1 mark is for drawing the table. Lamarck, Darwin. You'll notice we can talk about the 2 laws, and they are use and disuse, and the law of inheritance. I'm only going to write inheritance, you can complete that. Inheritance of acquired characteristics, whereas his law was natural selection. In Lamarck, he says the organism is determined to change. And in Darwin, environment dictates the change. The environment dictates the change. Lamarck also said, well, you can explain that this can be split into 2, that inherited characteristics were passed on. Not inherited, sorry, acquired. Sorry about that. Okay, let's do it properly. The acquired characteristics were passed on to offspring. What did Darwin say? Favorable genes were passed on. And you can have others. They only asked you for 2 there. We've just looked at 3 important ones. Those are the 3 important ones there. So again, you're going to get a mark. Another thing on the table I must highlight at this time, that if you're writing the 2 laws here and you're giving the names here, on this side you can't say environment dictates. You'll get a mark for this guy, but if this one doesn't match, it doesn't correspond to this line here, you would not get a mark, even though it's correct that the environment dictates. So whatever you are comparing, you must compare like with like. Whatever you're comparing the same feature, you must compare across that way. All right? Are we happy with that, guys? That's how you get, and the 1 mark you get for the table. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Because they said 2, they're only going to mark the first 2 differences. If you're going to decide to give 15 differences, and you choose the first 2 that are incorrect, and the last lot that are correct, sorry, no marks for you. So remember that. Draw the table, and move on with that. There we go. This one says, study the diagram of a duck's foot below. Ancestors of the ducks did not have webbed feet. Explain how the webbed feet could have evolved in terms of natural selection. Now what are we doing? We got a new example, and we need to apply our information. So again, we start by saying that ducks had many offspring. Among these, there was variety. Some had webbed, and some not. In the water, webbed was an advantage. It was a more suited characteristic. So therefore, there was, while the competition was going on, the ones that had the webbed feet were at an advantage. So therefore, they would have survived. And if they survived, they could reproduce. Therefore, after several generations, the frequency of webbed would increase. Okay? And you can complete the answer that over several generations. We can. Abraham,
Aslam, I've
You're
got
feeling lonely there.
I have so many
you
questions
got
for
some
you.
questions for me. Shoot.
I'm having so much fun. The first one is from Innocent Duenda Mureki saying, Abraham, can you please ask Aslam about gene mutation and how it contributes to Lamarck's theory?
Okay.
He says the environment forces the organism to adapt, and if it does, its genes get used to the adaptation, thus the change will be inherited by the offspring. Am I right?
No, not. You see, Lamarck, he doesn't talk of the environment. Lamarck talks about the individual that wants to become better, firstly. Innocent, eh? Right? Firstly, Lamarck's theory is talking about the organism's will. You're mixing a little bit of environment and that. And don't worry too much about mutation. The mutation we've learned in the previous lessons is the same mutation, but we're going to talk about mutations later when we do a bit of evidence and the rest of it as well. But right now, Lamarck's theory, remember, is deterministic, and the organism forces the change.
All right, ready for more? Here's
Yeah.
the last one from Herim Tim saying, why is the theory of evolution referred to as the theory of descent with modification?
Why is the theory of evolution referred to as the theory of descent with modification? Great question. What does it actually mean? Descent means that the offspring and further generations. Modifications means certain changes took place, but not in the individual. The modifications took place in the population. We have to understand this, that these modifications, as we're calling them, were inherent in particular ones. But what happened is those modifications, those that had the gene for that, became more if it was favorable, and those that did not have it became less. And from there on, we have descent with and change took place. So bacteria, according to them, bacteria and the other protists were the original species, and there comes Abraham and I. Look at the bacteria, look at Abraham and I, very different in that sense.
You know what, Aslam, for the last one, I think you've just took the entire base for me, the fan base, because I have Charmaine saying, Asla, I love you, you make life so easy, and Simple Life Sciences, you know what, I'm in love with you.
Oh!
Ouch! You've got so much fans, hey?
Right, and on
And
that
I'm glad
note,
that he's really doing his
on
best to
that
help
note,
you.
I have one fan, Muhammad Lunat, that's watching me. Please don't watch too long, Muhammad. You may have to write the exams at the end. I just want to look at this. I have about half a minute to discuss this. Last question. Describe natural and artificial selection. I'm not going to discuss the answer in terms of an essay, the idea behind it. What does this question say? Using example, describe natural and artificial selection. Also highlight the differences. So if you're answering this question, you will write natural selection and explain with an EX. Then you will explain artificial selection. We just spoke about it last week. And then you will talk about the differences between the two. When you're explaining, you must give an example. Your example is 1 mark each, is a compulsory mark. So you describe natural selection as we have done today. You will describe artificial selection as we have done in the past. And you will then show the differences between artificial selection and natural selection to get your full marks. With that, mindsetters, enjoy the rest of your week. I hand you over to Abraham.
Thank you very much, Aslam. Unfortunately, guys, this was the last live show for the grade 12s. Catch the revisions next week. Thank you very much from Macmillan for sponsoring our show. It's been awesome. It's been great. I hope you've learned a lot, guys. We're still there to help you. Bye.